Hello, welcome to the floor. I live here now. Doing everything out of order because I got sick. I'm still kind of sick. Or at least suspected post-viral fatigue, whatever. Definitely aren't overexerting myself. However, I cannot blame this decision on being ill. Let me explain. I wanted to make a patchwork pride flag. That involves a lot of colours. I don't necessarily have a million fabric scraps in yellow or purple. Can do you blue and green and maybe red. Anything other than that, we're getting a little dicey. And then you've got the progress insert. I needed a lot of colours, and I could have bought a bunch of bits of fabric in a bunch of different colours, and that would probably have been fine, but also it was looking expensive. And then I went, some places sell remnant bundles. Maybe I'll just buy a remnant bundle and see what happens. Always read the description. I may have purchased more than I need. Okay, so vital statistics. This is from Metre, who I irrationally love in spite of the fact that they are priced according to what they are selling. Not a website you want to go to if you particularly want 100% silk and wool and all these fine things, but if you want trash, they will not charge you outrageous amounts for trash, which a lot of shops will. They're also, as it turns out, kind of local to me, so maybe I'll go in person one day. Anyway, originally their remnant bundles were 30 meters, which is more than enough, but they had doubled it. So it was 60 meters for £60, and I was like, it's probably more than I need, but yeah, okay. I actually paid £51 plus postage because I found a discount code on their Facebook page. They often have those around. Keep an eye out. I did not fully read the description, which was buy two, get two free. Or I did. I was like, I'm only buying one. But because it was 60 meters, it was already two. This is over 120 meters of fabric because I bought other stuff as well. I don't know what to tell you. I'm a bad influence. Does anyone want a patchwork pride flag? Please live vicariously through my suffering. I guess I'm gonna my nemesis, the cuckoo clock. Let's just unpack it and see where we get. So bag number one is mainly organza. A bunch of them are this kind of like striated organza, which I'm sure I will insert close-ups of because I'm not silly. We've got a green, a pinky, peachy coral, a blue slate shimmer. This, which it's like shot red and gray, this dark gray, and you've got this brown and this gold, which are more standard crystal organzas. This red, which is more matte, pale blue, and then I think this is supposed to be white, or just off-white. It's also, hello, you're doing an investigate. Also in here there were 4 printed mesh. They're very thin, they're very lightweight, they're very flowy. There's this tropical print, which there isn't very much of. There's quite a big bit of this yellow. There's a similar kind of print in beiges on white, and then there's lots of this stuff, which is, I think it's a manufacturing error. I'm holding it the wrong way around. This obviously I think fell foul of a manufacturing error where it was supposed to be this checkerboard print and the printing's not gone the whole way, so you've just got this pink. It's fine by me. Can use that for patchwork. Onwards to bag number 2. You'll notice I've stopped sitting cross-legged. It's because I find sitting cross-legged incredibly uncomfortable. Hashtag relatable content. I don't know. So I figured out what these random bits of paper that were in there were, and it's the measurement of each piece of fabric, which means one of these guys is like nearly 4 meters. Most of these are like a meter some, but there's like 62 meters between the two of these bags, which is pretty good. Anyway, this bag was heavier on what I would consider to be practical fabrics and also fancy fabrics. Let's start with the hideously obvious. This is immediately being quarantined because it's can glitter. Great. There's another piece of organza. There's a couple of pieces of this. It's like a loose knit fabric. I think I've got 2 pieces in white, or 1 piece in white and 1 piece in cream, unclear. And then this sort of pink stripy stuff. There's this kind of red marled jersey, which I seem to have 2 bits of. This is inside out, so you can't tell, but it's corduroy. There's another piece of organza, this sort of taffeta lining fabric. This is quite cute. I actually have some of this already. Some cute printed cotton. 2 different colors of this like ruched crinkle jersey, which is very lightweight. Some floral mesh. This sort of, it has a hand like a taffeta, but it feels like a suiting. This one feels kind of woolly. Black suiting. This is like a heavyweight cotton linen thing. This one is more of a dress fabric. This is another sort of cotton linen. 2 pieces of embroidered, probably curtain fabric. It's got a really cute embroidered edge and a little all over pattern, sort of embroidery and glaze style. This sort of floral dress crepe. This, which I had been eyeing up anyway and couldn't find when I placed this order. It's like a floral patterned satin and 3 different plaids. These 2 are more polyester taffeta feel. And then this one I think is cotton. There's loads of it. I wonder if there's enough to make trousers out of. So that is bundle number 2. Bag number 3 is heavy on the prints, and also it looks like we've got some really big bits in this one. There's like 3 or 4 pieces that are close to or over 3 meters. Not many that are under a meter, which is cool. I'm very out of breath. What have we got? A lot of prints. So we've got this very bold floral. We've got more of this white and beige light knit meshy stuff. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 florals in different colors. Got a cream, bluey green, a mint, a pink, pinky purple, more of a light blue, a grey or beige, and this is a lot. We've also got this red snakeskin, which is quite something. This greyish coloured jersey with a floral motif on it. I'm not quite sure what to make of that. This stuff, which is, it's like a purple paisley print, but it's sort of faded, I think deliberately. Then this white boucle and some very cozy, this is almost like a corduroy, but it's much cuddlier. More of a fleece, really. Wonder if there's enough for trousers. Trousers on the mind right now, because I don't have any. Bag number 4, final bag. Oh, puss. You're covered in stuff, puss. You're gonna go straight down the middle. Yeah, go on. Don't settle. Gonna have a good sniff. Good sniff. The floor is not nice. I don't want to live here anymore. Final bag. Right, what have we got? We have got this sort of Hessian effect furnishing fabric, which is quite cool. This scrap of pink lining, which was, I think was actually just to hold it all together because it was tied around in a bow. May not be included. Just being haunted by this particular shade of day glow yellow. Another kind of chunky boucle, cuddly stuff, this time in oatmeal and black and white. It's cool. I like it. Purple zebra print, not so much of a fan. And some nice blue and pink floral print. My nemesis. This is kind of like a dress crepe. This is even more crepey feeling and has, it's sort of deep red / purple with a border, kind of cool. You've got 3 really heavily textured ones. So there's this, which is like a khaki color, which has got a stripe, but also a textured chevron. You've got this, which is a nice basic black and has got kind of a basket weave textured pattern to it. You've got this crinkly, crunchly seersucker-esque green, which is very green. Got some lace, which I'm always here for some lace, and it's a white lace as well. It's not awful. This herringbone feels a bit like a wool suiting, probably a poly or a poly blend. Some lilac lining fabric, pretty standard. A sort of brown pink dress crepe with like a border to it. Not totally sold on that one. 2 pieces of, I think it's called cotton terry, or it's the kind of cuddly feeling cotton. And I hate it, but it's often for babies. So this one has stars stars. This one has little bears. This feels like a poly suiting. Needs a wash. Another cuddly textured, is it a knit? It is a knit. This time in sort of a coral pink. Big bit of cuddly blush pink jersey and a really big bit of jersey with this sort of crown print on blue. Well, I'm fed up of being on the floor. This is quite uncomfortable and I very much need to have a break now. I think we'll regroup back in the workroom and talk about where we go from here. Welcome back to the workroom. If you can't tell from the haircut and the fact that I am no longer ill, it's been a while. I've never really seen the point of just being like, hey, here's a whole bunch of stuff that I bought. And I think the question anytime anyone posts a fabric haul is, well, what are you going to do with it? And I have a lot of stuff. We need to know what I'm going to do with it. So, obviously I'm going to start by saying this was more fabric than I was expecting, but also in larger pieces. Now, I do have a system for anything that's of like a usable size, but smaller than about a fat quarter, goes into one pile. Depending what it is, I'll use it for small projects, facings. If I've got lots of different printed cottons, I'll use them as a lining on something that has lots of small panels, that kind of thing. And then smaller than that, so actual scraps. I have a whole bunch of shoe boxes, which I arrange them by colour, and I use that to do patchwork with. I actually have a whole video on one of the styles of patchwork that I do, and that's kind of what I had in mind when I was like, I'm gonna get some fabric to make a pride flag, which is still happening. Hilariously, I still don't have a lot of purple. I do realise it's the point, but do the queers have to have all of the colours? More importantly, why do so many of the flags have yellow in them? No one likes yellow. Anyway, there's basically two kinds of sewists in the world, I think. The people who go, okay, I've got my pattern, this is what I want to make, let's go and buy the fabric for it. And then I think smaller subset of people who go, okay, I have the fabric, what can I make? However, if you are part of that first set of people who finds a pattern that they want to make and then goes and buys fabric for it, you will notice that you probably also buy fabric just because. And now you have a whole lot of fabric and you're like, when am I ever going to sew from my stash? There's never anything suitable for the thing that I wanted. We're going to talk about the second set of people and the second way of working, the one where you pick up a piece of fabric and go, what can I make from this? Not, oh gosh, there's nothing in my stash that matches the pattern I want to use. Basically, this is my way of tackling it. The first thing I look at is yardage. That's the single biggest factor that is going to determine what you can and can't make out of this piece of fabric. How much of it do you have? There's no hard and fast rule for you have this much fabric, you can make this thing. It is super dependent on a lot of factors. What I find helps is having a mental list or a physical list, you can write it down, some kind of set of benchmarks. This is a thing I make a lot of, this is how much fabric it takes. I'm about to name some heroically small quantities of fabric, okay? Benchmark for everyone out there, I am 5'7", I have a 31-inch chest. If the fabric lengths I'm describing sound tiny, that's why. If I want to make like a sleeveless top, that's 1/2 meter. Doesn't actually matter whether it's a shell tank top style top or something more like a corset, it's always about 1/2 meter. 2 meters, I can make a tunic. A little bit more than 2 meters, a long sleeve shirt, either a historical long sleeve shirt or a modern one. Circle skirt, somewhere between 1.5 meters and 3 meters, depends how long I want it to be. 2.5 meters is a pair of pajama pants. My Tudor kirtle pattern, if I want a full length skirt with as much fullness as I usually want for it, that's 3.5 meters. I can be a bit flexible on that. Again, I know the bodice takes about 1/2 meter, and then it's how much fabric do I put into the skirt. I've got a couple where I've either made the skirt shorter or it's from a heavier fabric, so I've used 2 widths of the fabric, not 3. 3.5 meters for most fabrics is where I want to be for a kirtle. I can just fudge it a bit. A floor length robe of some description is normally more like 4, and I've completely skipped over the 1 meter mark, which is, I have so many things you can make with 1 meter of fabric. So many things. That sounds like a video. Put a pin in that one. So that's where I start, is how much do I have? Okay, what kind of things can I make out of that amount of fabric? Depending on who you are, what kind of clothes you make, what size you are, your benchmarks are going to be different, but you are going to have benchmarks. Whether it's, I need this much fabric to make an 18th century petticoat, or whether it's I need this much fabric to make a button-up shirt, you get the idea. Always remember, of course, that you can combine fabrics. Party color is a thing, and we should bring it back. Patchwork clothes are really trendy. Again, don't be afraid of Frankensteining together multiple pieces of roughly the same fabric if you've only got 1.5 meters of one fabric and 2 meters of another fabric. Well, they're the same weight and feel, that's a kirtle combined. Which brings me on to the next thing you look at. Let's talk about about some of the words that you can use to describe fabrics. First of all, easy one, stretch. Is it a woven fabric that has no stretch? Is it a woven fabric with mechanical stretch, which means that included in the fabric makeup there is spandex or elastine or something like that that causes the fabric to stretch, even though it is not a knit? Or is it a knit, a jersey, a mesh, something that is produced in such a way that it already has stretch? Stretch or non-stretch is a major factor in deciding what you're going to make out of this piece of fabric. You can't make a t-shirt out of a woven fabric, and you probably shouldn't make a button-up shirt out of a stretch fabric, though I'm sure people do. Everyone's very scared of stretch fabrics, but I find they're not that bad, and you can actually make far more things out of them than people think you can. But meh, whatever you're comfortable with. Then we need to talk about the weight of a fabric and the opacity of that fabric, which kind of go hand in hand. On one end of the spectrum, you can have very heavy. Heavy doesn't necessarily mean thick, although it often does. You can also get very heavy fabrics that are thinner. I'm thinking here of the difference between like a blanket weight wool, which is very thick and spongy. Trying not to get too far into the other fabric descriptors at this point. And then contrast that to something like a furnishing jacquard, which can be relatively thin, but is still extremely heavy. At the other end of the spectrum, you get very light fabrics, which are often also very sheer fabrics, so see-through. How see-through, again, varies. You can get sheer chiffons and organzas, which still are heavier than mostly opaque, very fine cottons and linens. They're still kind of see-through, but they're not as transparent as, say, for example, a mesh fabric that is entirely see-through, actually heavier weight-wise than a handkerchief linen. Then we need to talk about the feel and the finish of a piece of fabric. Is it smooth? Is it textured? Does it have a pile like velvet? Does it have a nap like brushed cotton? Is it smooth and shiny like satin? Is it slippery? Does it grip against itself? And this also kind of leans into one of the other words we can use when talking about fabric, which is the hand. Hand is a weird one. I think the easiest way to understand it is to think about the difference between organza and chiffon. These are two lightweight sheer fabrics. Organza has a very stiff hand. It holds its shape. If you scrunch it up, it poofs out. Chiffon has a very, very soft hand. It flows and drapes, and if you scrunch it up, it just disappears into nothing and continues to hang down in beautiful billowing curtains. If you make a skirt out of layers of organza, congratulations, you have a petticoat. If you make a skirt out of layers of chiffon, it will cling to you and drape, and you will look like a forest nymph. It doesn't really matter how much of each fabric you've used, that's how they will behave. But all fabrics have a hand, and it usually is somewhere from crisp, like organza, taffeta, twill, all the way through to a very soft hand, chiffon, many satins, not all of them. You get heavier satins with a firmer hand. Some of them are very drapey and fluid. Crepes, voile is somewhere in the middle. Quilting cotton has a pretty stiff hand. Something like cotton lawn doesn't so much. Some suitings are firmer and some are softer. In the same way that I think a lot of people say silk when what they mean is satin, and people say cottons are drapey and silk isn't. There's a lot of complexity in the way that we talk about fabric. Understanding that is genuinely helpful. Once you start understanding the different qualities that fabric can have, then you start understanding what fabrics are like each other and what fabrics are different. If you're learning to sew and you've picked up some patterns and your pattern says you can make this out of quilting cotton, taffeta, suiting, it's quite a common beginner sewer mistake to go, oh, I'll make it out of some old cotton sheets that are really well washed and very soft, or I'll make it out of chiffon, or I'll make it out of velvet. That pattern has offered you a bunch of thin, crisp fabrics. If you make it out of soft fabrics, it's not going to hold its shape in the same way. If you make it out of a thick, heavy fabric like velvet, it's not going to work as well. It's going to be bulky in weird places. But if you looked at something that said that it wanted quilting cotton, taffeta, suiting, that sort of thing, and went, okay, I want to make this as the see-through version, organza is the right choice for that, not chiffon. The final consideration with anything that you make is obviously the fibre content. Folks get real weird about fibre content. If you are taking the route of using fabrics you already have, or using fabrics that you find, or using fabrics that you acquire very cheaply in large and unknown quantities, getting picky about fibre content is is not a luxury that you have. However, what fibers are appropriate for what things is something that you should think about. I'm not necessarily going to make a coat out of cotton because cotton is total garbage at retaining heat. Conversely, if I have a really nice fabric but it's very synthetic, I don't really want to make a top out of that because I get very uncomfortable if I'm sweating too much, and that's only really a torso problem for me. Waist down, completely fine. However, when you're getting random bits of fabric, finding out what fiber you have is a problem. There are better and more expansive videos on this, but brief overview of burn testing. The way you find out what kind of fiber you have is you set it on fire. Setting it on fire will give you one of three results. Result number one, it melts. If your fabric melts and leaves a hard, what is called a bead, a lump behind and smells kind of awful, that's plastic. It is some form of synthetic. Probably polyester, not necessarily. Most synthetics will auto-extinguish, which means that you will set fire to them and they will melt into a hard lump and go out. A small number of synthetics, acetate, some acrylics, possibly a few more, do not self-extinguish and do instead burn extremely well. Those guys are pretty rare these days, except as it turns out in mass-produced Halloween costumes. One of the reasons it's a good idea to burn test your fabrics is to find out that you don't have any fire hazards on your hand. You probably don't. Most synthetics self-extinguish. Category number two is your protein fibers, so silk and wool. Silk and wool smell like burning hair. If you are unsure whether you have silk or wool, wool nearly always self-extinguishes. Silk does not. Silk burns really quite well. Silk likes to be on fire, and you'll get a sooty, ashy residue off the back of that. And then finally, you have the plant fibers, cotton, linen, rayon, which is a cellulose-based synthetic. There's a few other exotic ones, but be warned that many of the exotic plant-based fibers you will come across are just rayons, which are incredibly toxic to the environment. Bamboo fabric, not all it's cracked up to be. Personal bugbear of mine. Plant fibers smell like burning paper or burning wood. Basically the nice burning smell that everyone likes. They also burn pretty well. So there's this idea that if you are going anywhere near a fire, you should only be wearing natural materials. Not entirely sure where, no, that's a lie. I know where people have got that from, and it's from very cheap synthetics of years gone by, and again, unfortunately, children's Halloween costumes. As we've covered, most polyesters these days self-extinguish. Cotton and linen are heavily aerated plant matter, which in the fire-making world, we call tinder, and silk burns really well. Basically, when people say you should only wear natural materials near fires, they mean wool, and only wool, and also I question how much time they've actually spent around fires, because I don't know if you've noticed, virtually all outdoor technical wear is synthetic, and campers, hikers, and scouts were not routinely going up in flames. Also, quite a lot of people do not routinely hang out near open flames. Like that's quite a niche. That's quite unusual these days. Basically, the long and short of what I'm saying is that fire is a hazard. It does not matter what your costume is made of. Be aware of fire. It's kind of amazing to me that I have to say this explicitly on the internet. It doesn't matter what you're wearing. If you stumble too close to the campfire at your fest event, that's going to be bad for you no matter what. Sorry. If this is the path that you choose, you will get a lot of synthetics. It's fine. They're not perfect. They are plastic. I don't think we should be making more synthetics. I think we should be avoiding that at all costs, but there are synthetics in the world and I'm going to use them. They already exist. They're going into landfill otherwise. I like being warm and drying off quickly when it rains. You ever got a floor-length wool dress wet? That sucks. Anyway, off the back of that massive tangent, a lot of what I have are synthetics, if not almost all of them. Many of them are heavy knits or other stretch fabrics, which is a little bit outside of what I usually work with, so I'm gonna have to get creative. I think we can. I have a whole heaping lot of organza now. I have half an idea, but I need to let it percolate a little bit more because I have a lot of organza in a lot of different colors. I'm gonna have to experiment a lot to see if what I'm vaguely imagining will work, and I kind of don't want to tease it in case it really doesn't and it never sees the light of day. I love working with organza. It's one of my favorite fabrics. It always ends up looking magical and bougie, especially when you've got loads of it. Ultimately, Obviously, I have a YouTube channel. I'm going to be making lots of generic LARP kit to show off the kind of things you can do if you are just coming into LARPing and you're just getting into sewing, or maybe you sew a bit and LARPing is new, or maybe you LARP a bit and sewing is new. So for me, this has really worked out. I can definitely see why for many other people, 120 meters of random fabrics would be kind of overwhelming, especially since I think that's going to produce a lot of waste fabric after I've started making things. I do patchwork. That works for me. It's not going to work for everyone. You do have to think about what your workflow is and not hang on to bags and bags of fabric scraps just in case you need them one day. Take up patchwork or throw them away. If your fabric stash is not serving you, it shouldn't be there. The point of having fabric is to use it. If you're not using it, it's time for it to go. That's a whole other topic that we're not going to get into this time. Now that I've rambled at you for however long, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to keep the YouTube gods happy, and also see the many things I will be creating. Down in the description box, you will find a link to my Instagram, where you can find pictures of my cat, and also a link to my Ko-fi page. Ko-fi supporters get early access to all of my videos, permanent access to things like live streams, which I delist after a while, and the odd extra sneak peek. This really wouldn't be possible without the support of my Ko-fi donators, although I can promise you that the Ko-fi money gets earmarked for channel improvements and actual serious projects. 120 meters of Remnants came entirely out of my own wallet, because even I recognized that was a bad idea. It's fine. I'm fine. This is fine. This is fine. Can you tell it's very late at night? I think we need to end this here. Thank you so much for watching. Dream big, and I will see you next time.